Hey guys, Kyle here. So, just before the show starts, I wanted to mention our Patreon. You can pay us $1 a month as a thank you, as a tip. You can pay $2 a month to get access to one of our bonus content shows, episodes 2 days early, and a secret Discord chat where all of our Patreon donors get to go and hang out and talk with us directly. Then there's a $5 tier that you can donate to get access to a whole bunch more content. We have multiple bonus episodes on there. So please check it out. Patreon.com/itgetsweird. We don't advertise, we don't make money. So check it out and throw some money if you think that would be cool. Thanks. Welcome to It Gets Weird, our comedy show where we explore the unusual, the unbelievable, and the unexplained to try and make your world a little weirder. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Niall. And I, without thinking, just put lotion on my hands right as we started recording without thinking about the fact that I do make noise when I rub my hands. So now I'm trying to, the quietest I've ever done, rub lotion into my hands so it's not actual audio poison.
It puts the lotion on the skin, or else it records the podcast again.
Look, it's getting colder around here. My hands were getting dry. And this stuff, coffee bean and oat milk latte, it smells fucking great.
Shit,
I love
that
it.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's it's keeping my hands from hurting.
You say that's the quietest application of lotion you've ever done.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna go there. Never been like a situation where you've like needed to honk your pud and like you applied lotion very quietly because you didn't want to hear, like you didn't want somebody to hear you squeezing that motherfucking thing till it explodes, or what?
I'm gonna say this as delicately as I can.
Sure.
When your attempts at being as quiet as possible start before you have the ability or income to buy your own lotion and keep it away, a lot of times you country boys make do.
Right.
And,
exactly.
So there's no lotion noise to worry about.
That's true. Oh, okay. So a dry rub as opposed to sort of a wet.
Yeah, we're talking
mess.
Like a Texas style dry rub instead of like a Memphis brisket,
Yeah.
Where it was like a saucy brisket,
Yeah. Yeah, these are very good masturbation jokes, I think. It's a great way to kick off another episode of Psychic Winter, which is, I think, what we're calling it, right? Like, is that definitively?
I mean, it's kind of, you're leading the charge here, so I'm not going to like deny like a pretty solid name. Like I haven't really tried to come up with a better one, but it's good. Yeah, so
I think it's good.
I'm down for it
because like I guarantee that the material that I am getting into is going to carry us through the winter, I think. It's gonna take a little while for me to get through all the stuff I want to talk about.
It's nice that whenever you go on a run like this, it leaves room for me just to do like kind of fun, silly topics.
Yeah,
and like cryptids and stuff where like it's. Yeah, like
I like the breather.
It's fun to do to be tasked with the breather between the 3-part epic.
Yeah, and then sometimes you got to start a 3-part episode series with a really gross masturbation joke.
Yeah,
while covering a somewhat serious topic.
Now, was it grosser before or after I started relating it to types of barbecue? Did that make it better or worse?
Oh, that's a good question for our listeners. Email itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com to answer that question.
The moment I said Texas dry rub, did that make it worse or better?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I can't answer that definitively, but what I can tell you about is the life of our subject this week. Now, what Psychic Winter is, for people who maybe are just joining us, I'm covering the origins of the U.S. military's research into psychokinesis and the parapsychologists, the psychics, and the weirdos connected to these projects This isn't so much an in-depth coverage of Project Stargate. It's more like I'm going to examine people involved with that project and kind of talk about their lives and what they did and how they were involved and stuff. And there's a lot of people to talk about. So far we've covered Ingo Swann in depth, but we've touched on some people in the Ingo Swann episode in particular. Harold Puthoff, Russel Targ, Pat Price, and then of course Swann, Puthoff, and Price were all Scientologists, which we kind of unpacked how Scientology influenced their methods of psychokinesis and psychic ability and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But this week, I'd like to cover another subject who was involved with the studies at Stanford Research Institute, a subject who honestly, like, it's genuinely surprising that we're nearly 400 episodes into this show and we have not done this guy's story. And it just so happens too that like we're in the granular era of It Gets Weird, where like we're getting really in depth on our topics. And so you'd better believe this is a multi-part episode, and I learned an unbelievable amount of things about this subject. So,
okay,
for the next couple weeks, my topic is going to be Uri Geller.
Oh shit! Okay,
yeah. All right. Now, I actually kind of want to kick this off by asking you.
Spoon Hands himself.
Yes, exactly. I want to ask you. So I actually had a sort of interesting moment where I had to reflect on like what I knew about Uri Geller before I was deep into podcasting about the paranormal. Like, and the thing that I know him from is from a particular moment in my past when I was a little Pokemon fanatic. I don't know if you remember this. And if you don't remember it, don't worry, because we will talk about this eventually. But Uri Geller caused a fuss at one point because he sued the Pokemon company
over like Alakazam and stuff, right?
Kadabra, yeah. So we'll get to that. We'll get to that eventually. But I asked some friends who are like maybe a year or two younger than me if they know who this is. They did not know. I also asked some.
That's not surprising. With like, I feel like okay. Actually, I'm gonna let you finish what your setup, because we'll get into it. But
the setup, the other part of the setup is I asked some people who are older than me if they knew who this was, and they also said they don't know. But again, these are people like no older than like 35, I want to say. Mm-hmm. People don't know who this guy is, but as soon as you say he's the guy who started the spoon bending craze and psychic stuff, they know who you're talking about suddenly. Like, they don't remember him by name, but they remember the spoon bending idea.
Did you make sure that no one was confusing him with the cosmonaut Uri Gagarin?
I think Uri Gagarin is even less known than Uri Geller, because and Yuri Gagarin was a Soviet, right? Like he was a Soviet cosmonaut, and Uri is an Israeli British mentalist, infotainer, psychic, whatever. He's a lot of things, it turns out. I'm sort of discovering, and it's very interesting the places that he ends up going.
I could not tell you why. Okay, I can only guess as to why I have like a passing familiarity as a child, like because he was just like a pop cultural figure. The spoon bending stuff and the whatever you want to call his brand of magics. But I had like a short Houdini phase in like second grade.
Yeah.
Where I got really into like escape magic and like magicians, basically. it was sandwiched post dinosaurs and Greek mythology, pre
Yeah.
like what was pre solar system, I think.
Sure.
Where I just had like a quick dive into the world of magicians, and one of the three major times in my life I've for some reason considered trying to learn close up magic. Which is a passing, like a card tricks and shit is a thing that I think about randomly whenever I'm having like a crisis.
Okay. All right. We might want to unpack that at some point.
Well, I'm only guessing that because it was like when I was a child at one point, then during COVID, and the third one was during college when I was going through like a relationship thing.
Sure.
So for some reason, when I'm like spinning out, I'm like, learning card tricks would be like a really good thing to like. I don't know why. It makes no fucking sense.
I think it does make sense because I think that if you are engaged with both your mind and your hands at the same time, then you can just hold your own focus on a thing.
Yeah.
I also, and the thing is, you described like the phases that you described are phases that I went through as a child too. And I did spend a long time trying to learn magic, like stage magic as a kid. I had a book. My parents during Thanksgiving sent me home with a box of stuff that they're like, hey, this has your name on it. Get it the fuck out of our house, please.
Yeah, both of our parents have moved in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
and therefore are like, every time we go see them, it is, there's this stuff that we found, take it.
Please take it home. And what I found in there was like my old ball and cups, and like I had a magician's like red cloth for putting over my hand. And I had a little booklet on magic tricks, and that shit's got to be like 20 years old. I have not seen it in like 2 decades. So, I had that phase as well. I thought it was very interesting, but for me, it was less of a managing mental crisis thing and more of a, when I was little, I thought it would be so cool if I had the powers of a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't, and I wouldn't, and so
you thought learning magic tricks was safer than fire breathing, like
not
fire reading.
Not even that, just that like, I'm not going to get fire breathing dragon powers, so I might as well learn something adjacent. Which is conjuring. Like one of the tricks I remember I learned, and I would show off to my family a bunch, and they probably very much were humoring me, was this trick where you could take a quarter and like a certain size piece of paper, fold the quarter up into the paper, and then tear the paper up, revealing that the quarter's gone missing, and then I would conjure the coin from my mouth or from behind somebody's ear. So I knew some
choice.
And I knew some basic card card tricks and stuff, like manipulate things to the top of the deck, things like that. In the last 20 years, all of those skills have just completely gone. The only thing I retained was the ability to shuffle. So
that has served you better than probably most things you've learned as a child, honestly, because you've kept through all of the time I've known you. You've always had at least one active hobby that involved shuffling card decks.
It's true.
So,
magic is very interesting. Now, it's funny we're talking about magic because Uri Geller will like insist that what he does is not magic. So fuck you.
Is he like a mentalist, or like what does he call it?
He is a psychic. And what I'm going to spend, I want to kind of. So I'm going to talk about his like early life here because there's some weird stuff in his early life, at least according to him. The other thing that I did with this is I did, in fact, would you believe me if I told you, Niall, that I snuck in some history lessons that I think are important?
This has been the fun turn in doing this podcast for so long is Kyle getting more and more into history as we continue on.
Yes.
Pretty soon I'm going to start just buying you World War II books for your birthday.
You've made that joke to me so many times, and that's not even my focus. But
I know.
But what I would like to say is, at least in this instance, I think that this history is kind of vital, given what is going on right now. Because I have some tidbits about the history of Israel, and where that came from, and
and it's not just like apropos of nothing. Like Uri Geller and his family were involved in like multiple wars between Israel and the Arab world, essentially. So
wow,
it's there for a reason. I just didn't want to say phrases like mandatory Palestine with no context, because I'll be real, I don't think most Americans will know what that means. So I'm gonna give some tidbits on what this stuff means, what the history is, and I'll give you a couple places where you can learn more, because I'm not gonna go into super like detail, because this is mostly about Uri Geller, but I wanted that context to be here too, to help the story along and provide some context. So who is Uri Geller? And yes, that is the correct pronunciation, Uri, not Yuri, Uri.
Okay.
And so Uri Geller is an Israeli-British self-proclaimed psychic and entertainer of he does a lot of different entertaining things, I guess. He was born on December 20th, 1946 in Tel Aviv, in what was then called British Mandate of Palestine, or Mandatory Palestine. So what would eventually become the official, quote-unquote, official nation of Israel was then known as Mandatory Palestine. So for our brief history lesson here, and given how, like I said, the situation in Gaza is, which if you have somehow, listening to this podcast, have somehow fucking missed out on the last 2 months in late 2023 that Israel is just massacring Palestinians, people in Gaza, I think it's important to learn some stuff here. So, and like I said, our subject is Israeli, but even weirder, and we're going to get to this, beyond just the connections to Israel and multiple wars, he has connections to, of course, the CIA and, believe it or not, Israeli intelligence, the Mossad.
Okay.
So, yeah. So prior to World War I, Palestine was under Ottoman rule. And after World War I, with the defeat of the Ottomans, Palestine basically gets passed over to the British, which is, of course, very normal. Britain being the colonizers that they are. And this is what would be called British Mandatory Palestine. Now, to keep a long story short, British colonialists collaborated with Zionists to create the beginnings of the settler colonial project of Israel. Like so many British colonial projects, this all hinged on the mass displacement of the people living in Palestine, which a good portion of which were Jewish people too, by the way. There are Jewish Palestinians, Christian Palestinians, and of course majority Muslim Palestinians. But there were Jewish people there too. And Zionists will outright deny that Israel was a settler colonial project. But I would just point to the founder of political Zionism, the founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl. He explicitly refers to the project as a colonial one in a correspondence with Cecil Rhodes, who was a notorious British colonialist who believed in the greatness of the Anglo-Saxon race. So this
not great.
This is the stuff that Israel is founded on. And this greatness of the Anglo-Saxon race was Rhodes's justification for violent colonial projects in Africa, stealing lands from Africans, exactly what you would think. But for Herzl, the Zionist colonial project was purportedly intended as a way to create a safe haven for diaspora Jews, which means Jewish people who have, since biblical times essentially, been dispersed from their quote-unquote ancient homeland. He also would invoke a particularly anti-Semitic trope, which is that Jews could not assimilate into a non-Jewish society. Hence, they needed a nation state. And just to be clear, the Nazis believed that the Jewish people could not assimilate into other societies. That's a Nazi belief. So Zionism, even at its inception, prior to the establishment of Jewish settlements in Mandatory Palestine, was vigorously opposed by many, many Jewish scholars, rabbis, activists. It's a known thing. A lot of the contemporary Zionists would like you to not know that it is a very Jewish movement that opposes the idea that Jewish people need a state, like a nation. Like, so there, and there is still a very strong Jewish anti-Zionist movement to this day, just to be clear. Nonetheless, ever since the British and Zionist collaboration in Palestine, myths and grifts have been spread to uphold the legitimacy of the state of Israel and what it did to the people who were living in Palestine prior to colonial settlers coming in there and fucking things up. And then on a personal note, speaking on this as a Jewish person, I would say I'm especially proud of my being Jewish. I also think it's vital right now to say that Zionism is typically a very right-wing political ideology. I don't think it's necessarily Jewish, although Judaism sort of functions like a smokescreen for Zionism. It is founded on this idea that like we should, we have to put the Jews somewhere where they're safe or whatever. But like the whole point that I'm kind of trying to arrive at is if you believe this, if you believe that we need to found a state for the Jewish people to protect them, where are you going to do it? When this was originally being thrown around by the early Zionist movement, Palestine was not even one. It was not the only place that they were saying, like, we could go here. Like, the other big place that the Zionists were like, we could actually just colonize here was Argentina.
Really?
Yeah, there's a whole list of places that they were talking about going to, but conveniently, like Palestine would sort of be this convenient one, right? Because then they could invoke like the biblical history there, right? To say, historically, quote unquote, Jewish people like lived here and this is our homeland or whatever. The problem, of course, with literally any project like this is people already live there. So if you want to establish an ethno-state in that region, you better be prepared to displace people. And again, by the historical texts you can find about it, the Zionists were very much prepared to kick people out however they needed to set up this state. Anyways, I just want to say, Zionism is typically right-wing. And this should all go without saying, but I might as well say it. Anti-Zionism is not anti-Semitism, but anti-Zionism is absolutely no fucking excuse for anti-Semitism. And even and following that, under no circumstances is any of this shit making Islamophobia and Islamophobic racism and such any more or less tolerable or intolerable than anti-Semitism. It's all shit. So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Get out of my soapbox for a minute. So all that being said, I didn't want to just say mandatory Palestine, Israel, and Uri Geller without talking about this, even if a bit briefly. I'm skipping over lots of details in history here, but if you want to be educated on the historical context of Palestine and Israel, I recommend checking out the website decolonizepalestine.com. Has a great series of stories that have links to their references and the books that they're pulling from, the history texts. Check that out. Once you're educated, check out pcrf.net. That's the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund, and ceasefiretoday.com. That has links to how to contact Congress, where to find, how to do protests, things like that. I've contacted Congress. So just since this is all still horrible right now, I say everybody should be doing this. What the people of Gaza are asking for is the bare minimum, which is to keep talking about it and to keep trying to educate people and to speak out and protest. Just keep doing it. So Doing it again. I know we've done it a couple times already and brought it up on the show. Doing it again.
Well, we wouldn't have to if it wasn't still going on.
Right, of course. So, anyways, here's the point. The world that Uri Geller is born into is basically this grift on history to uphold a right-wing Zionist state that claims to represent all of Judaism. I reject that. And, of course, there is all the nationalism that comes from that. And I'm going to kind of illustrate that through Uri Geller in this episode. So let's talk about the actual guy, Uri Geller, and his life growing up in Mandatory Palestine. So Uri is the only child of, I actually don't know how to pronounce this name, Manzi, M-A-N-Z-Y. This is his mother, I believe. Manzi. Her last name's Freud, by the way. And then his father, Yitzhak Geller, and I'm going to say that one right, Yitzhak. So, Yitzhak.
Hey, at least one of us on the show can do it correctly, because I can't get that
nobody
guttural thing going on.
It's one of the benefits of growing up Jewish is I can actually do that shit. And every time it comes up actually around my Goyish friends, they're all just like they can't even begin to do the ch. So Yitzhak Geller is a former Army Sergeant Major. And by Uri's own account, his mother is a distant relative of Sigmund Freud. I don't know if this is true. This is just something that he says. So maybe, I don't know. As for Yitzhak, Uri describes him as a shining beacon in the totally not inhabited Palestinian desert. So here's Uri in his own words from his website, which, by the way, his website there is so much shit on there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's writing a fucking autobiography on that website at length.
Now, is this website more up to date, or is it the kind of old school just text wall type website?
It is a text wall, and I think the website could stand for some updates, but it's not like Angel Fire era. But I do think the information on there, at least as Uri wants it presented, is up to date.
All right, here's a question that I just feel like I have to ask.
Sure.
Because I am an idiot. Is Uri Geller still alive?
Yeah, he's still around. He's 76. Wait, shit. I already forgot when I said he was born, but he's 70 something. He's still around.
Okay.
In fact,
I felt like I should know that before we move on.
I want to tease this because this is going to come in the last episode. But Uri Geller, as recently as this year, was making comments about the current situation with UFOs.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I remember. Okay. I think you sent me something on Twitter at one point. Okay.
Yes.
I remember this.
There's a whole side to him that people don't know that is closely connected to UFO stuff, and it's weird and confusing. So anyways, here's Uri talking about his father. So here's what he says. Yitzhak Geller, like so many others, believed that he had a covenant with God by living in the Promised Land, until God, in his perfect wisdom, revealed to his chosen ones why they had been chosen. If a man settled on a piece of land in Palestine, and if by sunrise he had established a water supply and a dwelling, Turkish common law gave him the rights of a settler. Yitzhak and his friends purchased a piece of scrub desert from a sheik near Beersheba. The sheik felt sure that the land could not be settled because the nearest water line was a mile away. The planning for this new Jewish settlement went on for months. In pitch darkness, the young men and women practiced assembling their prefabricated huts and laying down a water line that would not leak. They loaded their new community on 6 trucks and under cover of darkness arrived at, quote-unquote, their land. When the sun arose the next morning, it saw a brand new kibbutz, complete with huts, fences, watchtowers, and a precious water line. The Weri kibbutzniks proudly patrolled their settlement in the searing heat of that long first day. The Arabs came up with their flocks and tents and just stared at this miracle in the desert. There was no hostility in the air. The ancient law had been honorably fulfilled.
So they did. This is just maybe the dumbest comparison, but it's going around right now. Have you seen the video that's going around of someone was getting like a deck built and they left it and like the person working on it left it overnight and it was like half finished, and they came back in the morning and all of the lumber was taken apart and laid neatly and like everything was just disassembled entirely into just like rows. They did a reverse of that. We're like overnight it just like bam. Oh, hey, look, when you lotion your hands, you can't snap very well for a little while afterwards. Found that out. They did the inverse of that, where it's they got it down to a science where they could just go in, set up an entire community overnight, and be set up so they can make claim to the land. That is a wild system of land claiming, I guess, that I did not know about.
Well, let me just say one for those who may not know. A kibbutz is just it's a Hebrew word for like this sort of communal living space, where people are all sharing their stuff. It's a commune, essentially, a Jewish commune. And then to add on to that, Niall, this idea, this is another Zionist myth.
Okay.
So you'll find people claiming that the land Israel was founded on, this place was a barren desert that was neglected, that it was not worthwhile. It was only flourishing once the settlers posted up on it. I can't help but read what Uri Geller is saying here as being just an extension of that myth. Because and just to be clear, when the British had control of Palestine, it was, I forget the name of their like classifications for like geographical locations, but it was classified as like, this is a self-regulating, like fully realized society. Like it's so basically what I'm trying to say is even this myth does not hold up, that Israel was just some barren wasteland that nobody could make use of until the Jewish people came and took their rightful land back from them. You know, that it's just not real.
Okay.
So yeah, and this kind of serves to paint Palestine as uncivilized and justified in its taking by those who, you know, might properly civilize and utilize it. Again, it's a myth. Uri describes how Yitzhak and his friends would constantly patrol the area lest they be murdered by, quote, anti-Jewish fanatics. Now, again, this is after this is like around the time of the 1948 mass displacement and killing of the Palestinian people, called the Nakba. So these quote unquote anti-Jewish fanatics are I'm kind of reading into it as these are probably people who want to fight back against their land being forcibly taken from them.
That makes sense.
So, furthermore, I find some of Uri's descriptions of his father around the time he was a baby very odd. So check out this passage from his website. Here's what he says. By 1949, the local outbreaks of violence had become more dangerous each day, and the little world of Israel had no peace for the baby Uri. Yitzhak found himself spending more and more of his time in soldering and training others to be soldiers. The stress and strain was beginning to take its toll. Unlike many Jews, he could find no solace and peace in reading the Bible, nor in prayers. He was a man of action, and when he was troubled, he found some release by going to another woman. One day, he found a young woman who gave him more peace than did his wife, Marguerite. And Marguerite was so heartbroken that she took young Uri and left home. Yitzhak, too, was heartbroken, but now it was a matter of personal survival. So
gives him more comfort is an interesting way to describe that.
Yeah, describing it's very weird. It's like he's almost describing Yitzhak as like, I'm so sad I have to do this, but I do need to fuck this other woman.
Yeah,
like
there is. Yeah,
it's very weird. Like,
all right.
and the more I read Uri's like accounts of his parents, the more I feel like he has some psychological stuff going on that I'm not qualified to. I don't want to read into too much, but it raises question marks above my head. So apparently the heartbreaking tragedy of Yitzhak leaving his wife for another woman was too much. And so at a very young age, Uri and his mother moved to a small town near Tel Aviv where she worked as a seamstress. During the day, Uri describes that he basically was like spending his time mostly with another family while his mother worked. And he says that this life was anything but peaceful because his daytime caretaker often shouted at her unruly children. So he's just saying, like, I lived basically with this other family while my mom worked.
And she
sucked. She was like loud and mean to her kids or whatever.
All right.
Now, this is where Uri's own account of his childhood takes a bizarre turn. This is what he says happened to him while he was exploring the town one day in December of 1949. Across the street from... also, he speaks in the third person on this website a lot, like most of the time. So just keep that in mind. Across the street from his apartment was a stately Arab estate. It was fully a square block in size with a gray shuttered villa in one corner. It was surrounded by a high wooden fence that screened it off completely from eyes on the street. One day, Uri, in trying to peek through the fence, found that a vertical board gave way as though it were hinged at the top, and he stepped into what seemed to him a magical world. He saw near him a pool with fish in it. Through the ancient olive trees, he saw the shuttered gray stone house. No one appeared to be near, so he cautiously moved into the garden. The heavy foliage was sweet-smelling, the air was fresh, and the sounds of the street seemed far away and unreal. He dipped his bare feet into the pool and found that the fish were friendly and began to nibble on his toes. For the first time in his life, he had a vision of beauty and peace. As this feeling settled down into the heart of a 3-year-old boy, he lay down on the grass and fell asleep. Uri awoke from what seemed like a long, long sleep, and he knew by his stomach clock and by the shadows that he had missed his noonday meal. He decided to take a trip around this vast, scented forest before going home. As he reached the south side of the pool, with the sun at his back, he looked up at the clear sky over the pool. Slowly settling down from the sky was a huge, silent, bowl-shaped object. He stared in fascination. What kind of an airplane was this? All the planes his father had shown him were wonderfully noisy things with bird-like wings. This one was as quiet as his garden. It looked like the bottom of his mother's huge aluminum bowl, which she used to wash vegetables. It gave him a feeling of peace and beauty and of strength like when he was with his father. Suddenly, between himself and the bowl in the sky, there was the shadow of a huge figure like the shadow of a man with a long cape, because there were no arms or legs to be seen. As he stared at this figure, a blinding ray of light came from its head and struck Uri so forcibly that he fell over backward and into a deep sleep. Again, he slept for several hours to be awakened by the chilling shadows of the setting sun. He leapt up cold and hungry. He looked to the sky for the bowl, but it was gone. He remembered the blinding light of the shadow man, and somehow it made him feel good. He ran to the fence, found his loose board, scuttled through, and ran up the steps to the third-floor apartment. His mother asked him where he had been for so long. He eagerly told the story of the garden, the fish that nibbled, and the bowl in the sky. His mother spanked him for being away and scaring everyone by his absence, and then telling such a tall tale. So for many years, he did not speak to anyone again about his secret garden or the bowl in the sky. For a while, he would return to the garden and await the bowl. But when it did not reappear after a few months, he forgot all about it.
So little Uri had both a step into an entirely unknown world of riches moment, while also having a step into an entirely unknown world of extraterrestrials moment.
Yeah, Lil Uri's big day out, the day he met an extraterrestrial, probably. Or a shadowy CIA agent in a black helicopter. Who knows?
Very well. Very well could be.
No, he actually talks about this encounter in another place where he basically says, like, not the encounter specifically. He talks about the Arab estate that he found, and he describes being a child and interpreting the feeling that he had there, that whoever owned the estate was giving him permission to come and stay there and explore, but he never met the person who owned the estate. So it was almost like they were watching over him while he was there or something. It's a little weird. I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's his account of being 3 years old and getting blasted in the brain by a probably alien. Which, again, not to jump too far ahead, but I have literally heard Uri himself say, "I believe in UFOs. I believe in aliens." So it's a thing with him, but it appears somewhat sparingly in some of his public, I don't know, accounts and stuff.
It kind of feels like a guy who's known for bending spoons and being a psychic.
Yeah.
You would kind of think that would give him a free pass to be like, yeah, UFOs are real too. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like there are certain things that if you make your life about, it's like having someone who's a rock star and you just expect them to also have very specific thoughts about like high-end like liquor brands, like you expect it feels like something you get to have when you have that occupation. So
Yeah.
I think being a psychic, you should be able to believe in all sorts of wacky shit and have people just listen to you and go, oh cool, you're the psychic. Of course you do.
Sure. For me though, I would add that at least for Uri, I mean, again, I don't want to go too far ahead here, but I do kind of see him as a grifter.
Fair.
And I think that for him, he says these things because, his psychic abilities will get, I've seen videos of him getting, somewhat gullible, but regular people, right? He can convince regular people who aren't putting a ton of thought into what he's doing. He can convince them that he has powers. Normal people will walk away from him whoa, what did just happened? But then I think that by invoking stuff like aliens and weird esoteric things like that, he's also guaranteed to reach the people who are already way ready to believe this stuff, right? And there's a lot of crossover between human psychic abilities, if you believe in them, and aliens and UFOs. So
yeah,
I think he just knows his demographic. You know what I mean? But I also agree with what you're saying. So, also, like I said, you can find basically all this stuff on urigeller.com. This is his account of himself. But much of what I learned about Geller's early life that isn't a direct quote from Geller, that isn't his version of the story, comes from the book The Magic of Uri Geller by James Randi, aka The Amazing Randi. And Randi will factor in quite a bit later on in this story. So hold on tight for The Amazing Randi.
So what are you going to eventually tell me what The Amazing Randy's deal is? Because that you can't just drop that and not. Okay,
I'll tell you.
Right.
I mean, I'll tell you what he is right now. He's a magician.
But what is he? Is he a big stage magician, or is he?
He was, I believe, a stage magician. But his work here is he aggressively went after Uri Geller to debunk him, over the course of decades.
Did either one of them attempt some sort of plot involving a box and drowning and breaking free along with the teleportation device?
No, but there were some funny TV appearances, but no, nothing quite like that. Okay. There was an incident with a woman who got actually sawed in half. I said sawn? Jesus. Yeah. She got sawed in half, and that kind of ruined the credibility of Randy for a little while, and he had to kind of step back and say, sorry, I murdered that woman with the saw, but I really am trying to debunk this fraud. Oh, I'm sorry, I made this up.
Okay, good, because oh man, imagine some guy doing stage magic, and he just gets the wrong saw or the wrong box or whatever the fuck, and just doesn't notice and saws a woman in half on stage,
and it ruins his ability to discredit a huge fucking fraudster named Uri Geller. That would be a great movie, I think.
Yeah.
No, he didn't do that. I made that up. I'm sorry for lying. Um, so what I find especially interesting about the story of 3-year-old Uri and what is presumably a UFO and alien is that it sort of implicitly functions like an origin story for the supernatural path he would end up on. While this isn't universal, like I said, this isn't universally true for all UFO and ET encounters necessarily, but I think it's safe to say that, like I said, human psychic abilities and close encounters have historically had quite the crossover. So, like, think of Space Brothers and New Age starseeds, but Uri at this point never says outright, I was visited by an alien that day and they unlocked my psychic potential. But that is what that story feels like in a way, right? Like, I mean, is that kind of how it felt to you when I read it?
Yeah. So he never straight up says it, but yeah, that is how it feels. But I also am I'm starting to understand maybe that you shouldn't take everything he says.
Yeah, and I found that his I'm gonna I will dig some more, but I found like the earliest account of him talking about aliens and UFOs was in like the 90s, which again, like that would be decades after the SRI stuff. So, anyways, we'll get there. So Uri claims that he was 5 years old when he first discovered his psychic powers. He says that he was eating with his family one evening when the spoon he was using suddenly curled up and broke in his hands, despite him applying no physical pressure to it. This apparently freaked his parents out, so he didn't bring it up again with his family. Instead, he would practice the spoon-bending mental powers with friends and peers at school, putting on demonstrations that served to help him develop his abilities. Uri casually mentions here that his mom thought that perhaps he had inherited these powers from Sigmund Freud somehow. I don't know how that works, but that's what he says.
Was Sigmund Freud is not like a psychic?
No, he just studied the mind,
So so Sigmund Freud understood the mind so well
that he passed on psychic
his
powers.
Descendant got psychic abilities.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. That's that's something I guess that Uri's mom would say at some point. But again, I don't even know. Like, there's no confirmation that he's actually related to Sigmund Freud. So after this experience, Uri paints a picture of chance incidents that would gradually make him more aware of his burgeoning psychic abilities. For instance, his mother would play cards in her free time, apparently for money. And when his mother would come home in the evening after card games, I guess Uri would tell her exactly how much money she had won that evening. Like, he would just guess it and say it. And he claims that he was correct so often that it became a game between him and his mother. So she would like come home and he would be like, your earnings were this much. And she would be like, my God, how did you know? Like,
however, see, here's the thing. I must be fucking psychic too, because sometimes Jules would look, we've been dating a long time. This stuff happens. She would stick her foot out and say, which toe am I thinking of? And I would touch a toe. And I was, for like an 8-month span, I was right about 90% of the time. And now I've lost it. Now I can't do it for shit. But I must be psychic too, or at least have had a kind of a run there.
And like, I'll get, like, we're going to get to some heavy debunking stuff later on, but like, think about the fact that I was actually talking about this with a friend.
Uh-huh.
And we were talking about I forget, I'm not going to remember, like, if people out there know what I'm talking about. There was like a study on people guessing between the numbers 1 through 4.
Okay.
And that statistically people were much more likely, like by like 70%, to guess a specific number, which was 3 when prompted. It was like, so what I'm trying to say is that, like, people do these like mental, almost passive, like calculations and logical or like leaps to arrive at like if you're told, I want you to randomly choose between 1 through 4, you kind of passively think, well, the most random number for X reason is 3, right? Like, so
yeah, that's literally game theory.
Yeah.
Like, we're just describing game theory.
Yeah. So
and that's what is
Yeah, I was
okay. Anyway.
I was literally just being told this the other night, but with my roommate. So like it's these are the kinds of things that get manipulated by people like Uri Geller.
Right.
So Uri also describes being bored in school one day. And he's like, sitting there ruminating on the mysterious garden and the UFO visit all those years prior. And he recalls checking the school clock and then his watch. And he notes that it's 10:30 a.m. Then he thinks really hard about how bored he is and how he wishes it were noon so he could go visit the garden on his lunch break from school. And after thinking this, when he glances down at his watch again, it's now noon. However, as he gets up to rush out the door, everybody in the class stares at him because the school's clock still says 10:30. And so at first he assumed that the watch was broken, so he had it repaired. But then the same thing happens the next day, and it eventually dawns on him that he is actually causing the watch's hands to move with his mind. This is a thing that he would carry on to later in life, apparently, because I watched him do a thing where he claimed to take the compass on a boat and make the compass move with his mind. And he literally puts his fingers on his head and
stares
at the thing and goes, move. It's so embarrassing.
Okay. I've never actually watched this man do anything, so I'm not fully aware of the showmanship of it.
Oh yeah,
but
that's.
Ugh. So this guy basically is just he trolled himself by making his watch go forward and making himself think it was noon.
I mean, yeah.
This is. I understand this is
true.
the story. I'm all of the, look as playing the role of this podcast that I currently am playing. I have to look at these stories as if this guy's not lying to me, because where else is the fun of it?
That's
then
true.
we can yell at him later.
Yeah.
Because I'm guessing 95% of this is absolute garbage. But
yeah.
We'll play in his space for a little bit.
Thank you for playing in the space. So he stayed in Tel Aviv until his parents divorced when he was 9 years old. He was then sent to Kibbutz Hatzor Ashdod, just outside of Tel Aviv, which Uri claims was because his mother did not want him to see that she had found another man, a pianist named Ladislas Gero. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but Uri, I guess, didn't like Gero. He describes feeling as if this new man in his mother's life stole her attention away from him. And he has he lives in the kibbutz for a while. He describes how sad and lonely he was in the kibbutz and people didn't like him and blah, blah, blah. And he didn't like to be around other people. And he was sad that he was away from his mother. And it was around the same time that Yitzhak Geller participated in the Second Arab-Israeli War, referred to by Israel as the Sinai War, while the Arab world would call it by another name, the tripartite aggression. So Gamal Abdel Nasser, then president of Egypt, had nationalized the Suez Canal, turning it over from the privately owned British and French interests and turning it over to the public. This was a threat to colonial power, of course, and this was also a threat to Israeli expansion, among other things. And Egypt, being what Israel considered to be their biggest local threat, came under attack from France, Britain, and Israel during this war. This mobilized Uri's father's unit, and Uri has his own interesting account from this time, an account that I found really weird and wanted to include because I think, again, this illustrates how this man thinks. So here's what he says. When the war started on October 29th, 1956, Uri and his friends were kept in their bomb shelter for 4 days. Again, it's so weird to me that this is in the third person because I'm 95% certain this is all written by Uri Geller himself. And he's telling it like it's a dramatic tale that, I don't know, it's weird. They listened to the radio and prayed many times each day for their parents and that God would spare Israel as he had in the times of Moses. Uri kept wishing especially for the safety of his father. 2 weeks later, he received a message that his father was alive and was going to visit Uri on the following day. Uri stood in the road all day where the bus stopped, waiting for his father. This was the longest day of his life. When he was about to give up, a bearded, dusty soldier leapt from the back of a truck with 2 rifles. It was his father. Uri rushed up and got scratched by his father's new beard. He was bear-hugged till it hurt, but he didn't mind. His father stayed at the kibbutz that night and told the marvelous tale of how God had led them through the Mitla Pass, going almost invisibly past the huge Russian-built tanks, which, side note, Russia was supplying Egypt with a bunch of weaponry and stuff at this time.
Gotcha.
Which Israel, of course, did not like. So it says, Uri slept very soundly that night, knowing that God watched over Israel and that his father was safe. In the fall of 1957, Uri left the kibbutz and came to live with his mother. His mother confided that Ladislas had asked her to marry him. What did Uri think? Bravely, he replied, "Mother, you do need a friend. You are always alone. Does this mean that you would not have to go to work every day?" "Thank you, Uri. Yes, I would not go to work. You see, Ladislas owns a small hotel in Cyprus, and we would all work together there." "Where is Cyprus? Is it like the kibbutz? I didn't like it there at all." "No, Uri, it is not like the kibbutz at all. Cyprus is an island." "An island? That sounds great. What's on the island?" "It is a very civilized place with resorts, mountains, and different people live there, Greeks and Turks." "Mother, what are Greeks and Turks?" "Well, you see, we are Jews." "But mother, what are Jews? I thought we were people like everyone else. My father talks about Jews in the covenant with God in the promised land, and how God helps the Jews when they are in bad trouble. But why should God do this only for the Jews? How do you become a Jew?" "Stop, Uri. I can't answer all those questions at once. First, you are a Jew because your mother is a Jew, and I am a Jew because my mother was a Jew, and so on, all the way back to the beginning of our history, which starts with a man called Abraham. He was not Jewish, but God came to him here in Israel and said, 'Walk in my ways and be blameless. I will establish my covenant between me and you, and I will make you exceedingly numerous.' And God and Abraham entered into an agreement, and all of Abraham's descendants became the Jewish people." "But mother, I don't feel like a Jew. Why is that?" "Well, you see, your father and I agreed when you were a baby that it was enough for you to be brought up in freedom here in Israel. We didn't want you to have to go to shul and be told a lot of things about Judaism while you were too young to understand. Because you have not gone to shul and do not know the synagogue, no one has pounded it into your head that you are a Jew. You are a citizen of Israel. That is enough. When you grow up, you can decide for yourself if you want to be a Jew." "I understand, mother," Uri said very gravely and left the room. From now on, he began to notice who was a Jew and who was not. He found that those who were religious Jews spent a lot of time praying and eating special foods and obeying many rules. Those who were not religious spent more time playing and at the beach and were not fussy about food and rules. Both Jewish groups got along well in Israel. So that's Uri's account of what happened during the war. That war.
That's one way to put it.
It's interesting. And so at 11 years old, he moved to Nicosia, Cyprus, with his mother and lived with his stepfather in the hotel that he owned there. It was in Cyprus where Uri would attend Catholic high school and learn English. Although there are no records of him ever graduating, doesn't mean he didn't, but for whatever reason, we do not have a record of this.
Okay.
Now, we will find as we peel back the Uri onion that some of this stuff tends to run counter to other stories he would tell, or at least it makes it harder to get at what he truly believes. So, in the documentary, The Secret Life of Uri Geller, directed by Vikram Jayanti for, I believe, the BBC, Geller talks about where, quote, all of this started, and he offers something like an origin story for pursuing his psychic abilities that I find very interesting. So here's what he says in his own words. "If I may, let me tell you how it started in me, or in Uri Geller. I always had this James Bondy mind, you know? I was a great storyteller in school. I could fantasize and imagine things, and I would kind of utter them out and create a story about everything. I would tell stories in front of my class and so on. We're talking around 1960, 1961, and one day, I befriended a guy called Yoav Shacham who stayed in our little hotel. Yoav saw me bend a spoon and a key, and I did telepathy with him, and I told him one day, 'Yoav, I can read your mind, and I know you're an Israeli spy, aren't you?' And Yoav said, 'Uri, when you grow up and have to join the Israeli army, I want you to go to the paratroopers, then go to officer school, then find me, and I'll help you. I'll get you into the Mossad, because your abilities are incredible and we need them.' So you can imagine, you tell this to a 13-year-old, a 14-year-old kid, I'm over the moon. Wow, I'm going to be the greatest spy in the world. I'll work for the Mossad, and I'll read minds, and I'll bend gun barrels. To make a long story short, 1819, I go back to Israel, I join the paratroopers, jump out of planes, I do my stuff, and then I go to officer school. I do exactly what you have told me.
So he literally gave himself like a fucking older man mentor character
who's going to recruit him,
superhero origin story.
Yeah, and they're going to recruit him into the Israeli CIA.
Because he's just so goddamn
special. So at 18, Uri would join the Israeli Army's paratroopers brigade, trying to follow the path laid out for him by his Israeli intelligence friend. Now, for those who aren't aware, service in the Israeli military is mandatory for citizens of Israel. Refusal to serve lands you in jail. As a member of the Army paratroopers, Uri would fight during the Third Arab-Israeli War of 1967, more commonly known as the Six-Day War. This was triggered by an Israeli sneak attack on Egypt, and it basically served as another expansion operation. This would all lead to Israel gaining control of the West Bank, Gaza, the Golan Heights, and the Egyptian Sinai Desert. However, Israel tends to paint this whole thing as self-defense, or even a quote-unquote preemptive strike for self-defense reasons. This is another claim that is made about the aforementioned Nakba, which is the mass killing and expulsion of Palestinians in 1948. And this is a thing that is said to this day. All of these wars, all of this aggression is all self-defense. So from decolonizepalestine.com, which again has a bunch of sources to all the things that I've said in this episode, if you want to actually educate yourself, it's out there. Here's what it says. The 1967 war did not materialize out of a vacuum, nor should it be understood as such. It constituted a continuation of Israel's wars against the region to achieve maximum territorial expansion. Particularly, this war would finish what began in 1956. Following the political defeat in the previous war, much of Israel's military actions were designed to goad Nasser and other Arab leaders into an attack. An example of this can be seen in the disproportionate Israeli assault on Samu in 1966, or the frequent unprovoked bombings of Syrian border positions. This is hardly our unique interpretation of events. At the time, this was widely understood. For example, the British ambassador in Israel explained that this tactic aimed to spawn a, quote, deliberately contrived preventive war. There is ample evidence to show that Israel was intent on provoking a war. This war would finally give them an opportunity to expand into territories not conquered in 1948, as Ben-Gurion lamented. This becomes exceedingly clear once we examine the diplomatic record and the numerous times Israel sabotaged any attempt at mediation or diplomacy to avert the outbreak of war. For example, throughout much of the crisis of 1967, Egypt expressed its willingness to resurrect and expand the Egyptian-Israeli Mixed Armistice Commission, which was officially rejected by Israel in May. In the same month, the UN Secretary General personally attempted to avert an escalation by traveling to Cairo to mediate between the Egyptians and Israelis. Once again, Egypt agreed to the proposal in an attempt to lower tensions. Israel rejected the proposal. Brian Urquhart, who was a senior UN official at the time, wrote in his memoir that, quote, Israel, no doubt having decided on military action, turned down UN General Secretary U Thant's ideas. So that's what that war is about.
Okay.
That's what kicks it off. Uri Geller, in talking about this war, says some odd things, believe it or not. For one of the things that I found him casually mentioning in the documentary is that the Israeli Air Force's use of napalm during this war would occasionally didn't hit the right target, which I believe he is trying to use to illustrate the danger that he was in participating in the war. But it echoes in an eerie way the reports from the last 2 months of the IDF occasionally having this very blasé attitude about sometimes accidentally firing on its own citizens, which there are tons of reports of this and historical precedent. Anyways, Uri recalls fighting against the Jordanian military when suddenly, from behind a rock, a Jordanian soldier leaps out, gun at the ready. And I'm going to let Uri describe here what happened next in his own words.
Oh, please. Oh,
And this is going to be our last statement for this episode. Here's what he says. He was about to shoot me, and I was holding my Uzi. And I looked him in the eye, and he looked into my eye, and it was like time froze. And suddenly it was like my whole life played like a movie in a flash, in a split second, in my mind. And I snapped out of it, luckily, because I realized that whoever is going to press the trigger first will survive. And I was faster than him, and I shot him, killed him. Soon after that, I was wounded in my 2 arms, and I woke up in Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. And only then it dawned on me what I have committed. And the ideological power in you, the love for Israel, for the Jewish nation worldwide, was embedded in me even deeper because of that war.
Wow. Okay.
So
I was like half expecting him to like do some bending the gun barrel bullshit in that story.
No, just nationalism.
But this, yeah, just doubling down.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm gonna cut part 1 off there because that is basically his entire early life. This is all prior to what he would become. And there's some very interesting stuff that happens once he's basically an adult who has left the military. He gets discharged because of his injuries. And it's not long after that he starts to turn into the Uri Geller that we know and love today. So we're going to get into that in part 2.
Hell yeah. All right. I did not know like any of this about this man. I, of course, also, I didn't know much about Uri Geller. I also am learning about the history of Israel.
I mean, okay, look, I realize it's not the most fantastical stuff talking about these wars and stuff, but like, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that people are a bit more educated. Like, whenever I talk to anybody about the situation, they're very timid and they're like, you're, and they'll, a lot of the times they'll like bring up the fact that I'm Jewish, which, to me is sort of like the Zionist project working because it equates all Jewish people with Israel, which is, absurd. Right. But, it does also kind of impress on me that like maybe as a Jewish person, I need to do some educating where I can, and I have a podcast that people listen to, so maybe I can help spread some knowledge about it. But I also think that it serves to illustrate maybe why Uri Geller is the way that he is.
Yeah, it is informative.
So and like we're gonna learn a whole hell of a lot more about who he is in episodes 2 and 3, because this will probably be 3 parts. Because he's fucking weird. He's fucking weird, and he has connections to U.S. and Israeli intelligence, which also have their own bizarre connections. Which, we'll see if we touch on those at all. Well, I'll see what I can do, but I don't know if I'm gonna. I've read some weird things about Mossad, which is complete. I mean, you think CIA is weird? Fucking, of course, Mossad is weird. We're like, if you really think about it, so much of Israel is just like there for U.S. interests. Like the reason so much shit happens is like the U.S. wants to exert. It went from British interests to U.S. interests, and there's a reason that happened. But long story short, nowadays the U.S. is the one who basically uses Israel as a means of exerting control over the Middle East. So,
yeah.
Anyways,
all right.
On to a big question. Okay, so Niall, big question.
Mm-hmm.
If you could successfully sue Nintendo to have the rights over any one Pokemon of your choosing, what Pokemon would it be and why?
Okay. Now, this is fun because I know... I think at this point in my life, I would say I know approximately 150 Pokemon. and those are scattered across the first couple of generations. If I could sue Nintendo to take, I mean, okay, here's the thing. I think Nintendo does a lot of things that I enjoy. I do enjoy a lot of their games, but they're a little ridiculous when it comes to copyright and IP and all those kinds of things. So just for like the biggest fucking hit, I out of like a spite play would just go Pikachu. Like fucking take the brand away. Like that Pikachu is probably bigger than Pokemon as
the
a
Pokemon
brand
company fucking
in a lot
crumbles,
of ways.
you understand, right?
Yeah.
Like it's
they have to like they have to like scramble to find the next successor.
Our new mascot is, I don't know, does Wheezing work? Are you guys cool with Wheezing? And then just like a crowd of people fucking booing.
Yeah. And the fun part about this is like I found out today, did you know that the BBC doesn't actually own like the rights to the Daleks and stuff?
Oh.
It's
from
another
Doctor Who.
company. Yeah. So they have to like work out an agreement to use the like most iconic villains of their franchise.
Is weird. What happened there?
So I don't fully know. British TV is fucking weird, and they never assumed anyone would give a flying fuck about a single TV show from before about 1980. And so they just like put no effort or money into preserving or caring about anything. So that's why like a lot of old British TV just doesn't exist anymore. So I'm guessing they had the opportunity to buy the rights and they didn't, and someone just swooped in and took them. But I don't know.
That's weird.
But like I think I want to work out a thing like that for Pikachu.
Sure.
Where if they want to make fucking if Ryan Reynolds comes knocking and they want to make Detective Pikachu too, or you know,
you're raking in the big bucks, right? Like
they're gonna have to work it out with me.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to go through me to make that shit happen.
Sorry, Nintendo, you're gonna have to speak with Nile Incorporated to even begin to. You can't say the name Pikachu without at least getting some sort of clearance. All right.
Yes.
So
it's like the joke about Happy Birthday, like growing up. How big of a deal was it when like Happy Birthday went public domain or whatever the fuck?
And I remember
all of a sudden,
that, but
and all of a sudden, like every TV show could start using it instead of having to make up a fake Happy Birthday song.
Yeah, that was huge. I was fucking going crazy. We were popping bottles,
screaming
about
in the
that.
streets. Yeah.
Niall, I'm going to sue them for the rights to Slowpoke because I would like to reopen Team Rocket's illegal Slowpoke tail operation, make it a legal thing. You know, just like given how like horrible everything is, I might as well find a way to very quickly make money. And it seems that the Slowpoke tail operation worked until that meddling kid came through with his Bulbasaur and fucked everybody up. So, but here's the thing: he may have a Bulbasaur and a team of Pokemon who love him to back him. I have copyright law.
Yeah.
That's going to defend me from that bullshit. Way more powerful than even the most powerful Pokemon. Plus, I have a Tyranitar that's going to stomp the shit out of his stuff. So, you know, if he really does want to come a knocking and try some shit, he better think twice because those Slowpoke tails are going out at a profit. And I'm not afraid to take out a kid. And
I don't remember this specific episode. This was like a delicacy of Slowpoke tails.
This is in the first Pokemon game where Team Rocket's like harvesting Slowpoke tails. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it's the first. It's the first or the second game. And you like free Slowpokes from the control of Team Rocket by doing Pokemon battles. None of the adults in the town can do anything about it, but you roll up with your fucking Venusaur and show them what's what.
The weirdest justice system, but hey, it might actually be more equitable than ours. So
hey, honestly, if I could like settle issues with Congress through Pokemon battles, I think a lot of shit would change around here.
Now, here's the thing: is anytime you start trying to rationalize the Pokemon world, you just start looking like a certain era of PETA content. You know, it's. Remember when they released the fucking game where they just like added blood to Pokemon?
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Yeah,
I don't think that was their intention. Maybe it was. I don't know. That's classic stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, this has been part 1 of Uri Geller. We're going to get deep into Uri Geller's mind. We're going to get deep into his battle with the amazing Randy. And yes, we're going to talk about his actual lawsuit thing with Cadabra. So hold on tight for all that stuff, folks. And I think that'll bring us to some business.
Yeah. So if you want to follow us on social media, which in this day and age, why wouldn't you? We're on Twitter at IGW Podcast.
You can follow us on Facebook.com/ItGetsWeirdPodcast.
And we're on all your favorite podcatchers from Stitcher to Google Play to Apple Podcasts to Spotify. I do think Stitcher got discontinued. I got to take that out of my mental Rolodex.
Eventually.
But look up It Gets Weird on any podcatcher and we'll probably be there.
Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird. Come and check out our live streams. I actually have been playing Pokemon Emerald on there, which I'm going to be doing another one of those soon. I'm going to boot up Emerald and play through that. But we also did a Lethal Company stream, which, Niall, I don't know if you've seen that. Maybe you've seen Jerma playing it. That game is hilarious.
I have not actually watched that. I will have to check that out.
And I'm happy to tell you, Niall, that if you check it out and decide you want to play with me sometime, I'm going to say one thing, but I have a follow-up that is important for you. Yes, there are enemies in that game that are giant spiders. However, there is an arachnophobia mode that you can turn on so you don't see the spider. But what it does is there's a giant red text running around your screen that just says spider.
So here's the funny thing. I don't know what this game is.
Okay.
But I did see a screenshot on Twitter like a week ago of a video game where there was just the word in red colored font, spider going around. And so I was like, oh, cool. That's like a very helpful, because I've tried to play back when like Deep Rock Canyon was like a free game. On PS
Deep Rock
Plus.
Galactic.
That one. Yeah.
I love that game.
I could not play it. I tried to do it, and the base thing is, I just can't do it. Yeah. And
that game's so fun.
I'm into it.
Oh my God. I'm sorry. Maybe they'll add an arachnophobia mode to that game as well, because that game whips. So yeah, if you like video games, we do that shit too. I like video games, and I like video games.
Yeah.
So come check us out. Twitch.tv/ItGetsWeird.
Fortnite has Rock Band now.
Oh, fuck. And Peter Griffin.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you're excited about.
I haven't gotten there yet, but yeah, it's I'm sure I'm making my way there, I guess, someday. I'm not going to instantly archive that skin, so I never use it.
itgetsweirdpodcast@gmail.com. Look, if you have any thoughts that don't suck ass, go ahead and email us. If they suck ass, I think keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
Is my suggestion. But definitely email us if you have something fun to tell us, a good story. I would say most of you, in fact, I would say actual listeners of the show, I don't think anybody's ever sent us something that sucks ass. Mostly we get emails from people who are like, please promote our book about why Bill Clinton is trying to depopulate the earth. And we're like, that sucks, man. We're not talking to you. So yeah, give us an email. We might read it aloud on the show if you send us something good. Patreon.com/ItGetsWeird. We have a $2 tier and a $5 tier. At the $2 tier, you get access to a show called It Gets Weird TV that comes out every other week, where we talk about a weird television show that the people who donate to us get to vote on what show we're going to watch. Right now, we're in season 2 of The X-Files, which has been fucking great. And we discuss the show and a bunch of stuff surrounding it. We go on tangents, which some of you out there love that. And then, of course, at the $5 tier, you get access to It Gets Weird TV plus another bonus show that comes out in the off weeks of It Gets Weird TV. So you're getting bonus content every single week. Whether you donate to the $2 tier or the $5 tier, you get access to the main show 2 days early on Friday instead of Sunday. And you get access to a Discord where you can talk to us directly. We're chatting about all kinds of stuff. A lot of the times it's about the cutest cryptids and things like that, UFO stories.
A lot of cat posting lately.
Lots of cat posting lately, conspiracy theory stuff, all kinds of stuff. So check it out. Now, if we also have a $1 tier, which you don't get anything out of it. You're just saying, hey, I like your show. Here's a tip. Thanks for doing what you do. God bless. If you can't donate to It Gets Weird, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your congressman all about It Gets Weird and call for ceasefire now.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you all for listening to the show and for supporting the show. Keep telling all of your friends about it. This has been It Gets Weird, and I've been Niall.
And I'm Kyle, signing out.